You ever notice how some of the hardest words to say aren't the long, complicated ones? They're the short, simple ones? No. One syllable, two letters, and yet it can feel like you're carrying the weight of someone's disappointment every time you try to say it. You feel that tightness in your chest, that pressure to explain, to apologize, to soften the edges of your boundaries so nobody thinks you're selfish. But let me tell you something. Your peace is not selfish. Your peace is sacred. Most people don't realize that guilt is not always the voice of conscience. Sometimes guilt is the echo of conditioning, a habit we built from years of trying to earn acceptance. Somewhere along the line, we started believing that love was something we had to buy with our compliance. We thought yes was the price of being seen as good. But the truth is, love never demanded your exhaustion. Love never asked you to abandon yourself to be approved. When you say no, you're not pushing people away. You're pulling yourself back together. You're reminding your spirit that it belongs to you, that you are not a product of people's expectations, that you have the right, the divine right, to guard your energy, to choose your path, and to honor the quiet voice within that whispers, "This isn't for me." Saying no without guilt comes from one thing: detachment, not coldness, not distance. Detachment means your peace is no longer for sale. It means your worth isn't tied to who claps for you, who stays, or who understands. Because when you operate from purpose, you realize not every opportunity is meant to be yours. Not every invitation deserves your presence, and not every yes aligns with your calling. You can't live a full life if you're constantly emptying yourself for people who don't refill you. That's not kindness, that's depletion. And depletion doesn't serve anybody. Not them, not you, not your purpose. Every time you say no from a place of truth, you're clearing space for something that actually belongs to you, something divine, something aligned. Here's the shift. Stop thinking of no as a rejection. Start seeing it as redirection. You're not closing a door, you're choosing which doors are worthy to walk through. You're not being difficult, you're being discerning. There's a difference. Discernment is wisdom guided by peace. Guilt is fear guided by pressure. The world will always have opinions. People will project, assume, and sometimes even withdraw when your boundaries disrupt their comfort. But that's not your job to fix. Your only job is to stay rooted. Rooted in who you are. Rooted in what you value. Rooted in the quiet confidence that your no is not a rebellion. It's an alignment. And when you can say no without guilt, something extraordinary happens. You stop explaining yourself. You stop apologizing for existing with limits. You stop negotiating your worth. And suddenly, life begins to make sense again. Your relationships become cleaner. Your energy becomes lighter. Your purpose becomes louder. Because peace always follows truth. Always. And sometimes truth just sounds like this: no. Saying no is not rejection. It's redirection toward what truly matters. Most people hear the word no and feel a sting, as if something valuable has been denied or a connection has been broken. But the truth is, no is not the end of anything real. It's the beginning of alignment. Every time you say no from a place of clarity and conviction, you are quietly saying yes to something greater. Your time, your peace, your priorities, your purpose. The problem is many of us have been conditioned to equate agreement with love and rejection with loss. We learn that saying yes keeps the peace, while no disrupts it. But peace built on self-betrayal is not peace. It's silence born from fear. There comes a point in life where you realize that not every path deserves your steps. Some opportunities look golden but drain your spirit. Some people sound kind but carry intentions that pull you off course. The moment you begin to recognize that saying no is not about shutting doors, but about choosing the right ones to walk through, you start reclaiming your power. You understand that no is not a negative response. It's a sacred decision. It's the act of aligning your energy with purpose rather than pressure. It's you deciding that your time, your heart, and your peace are not open markets for negotiation. When you say no to distractions, you create room for destiny. When you say no to what's good but not right, you make space for what's meant. There is divine order in that. Some things are not meant to be held. Some connections are meant to pass through you so that you learn discernment. If you hold on to everything, you eventually lose yourself. But when you learn to say no from a place of wisdom, you begin to live lighter, clearer, and freer. You stop chasing approval and start walking in alignment. So when you feel that guilt rise up after saying no, remind yourself, it's not rejection, it's redirection. You're not walking away from people, you're walking toward purpose. You're not losing anything real. You're letting go of what was never meant to stay, every no rooted in truth. carries a hidden yes to something deeper, your peace, your calling, your life. Guilt is a feeling that most of us experience as if it were an undeniable truth. But in reality, it is often a false signal created by fear, not the voice of our soul. From early childhood, many of us were taught to measure our value by how much we could please others, how compliant we could be, and how willing we were to avoid conflict at all costs. This conditioning wires our mind to associate no with wrongdoing, even when saying it is necessary for our well-being. The moment we hesitate to decline something, the feeling of guilt creeps in, whispering that we are being selfish, unkind, or unloving. But if we pause and reflect, we realize that this guilt is not an objective judgment. It is a projection of external expectations onto our inner truth. It is the echo of fear masquerading as conscience, convincing us that our natural boundaries are a betrayal of love. When guilt arises, it is crucial to differentiate between the voice of authentic responsibility and the voice of imposed obligation. The former speaks quietly and calmly, guiding us toward actions that are aligned with our highest values. The latter is loud, manipulative, and insistent, pushing us to act out of fear of judgment rather than out of integrity. Saying no does not make you a bad person. It makes you aware of your limits, your priorities, and the sacredness of your energy. Guilt, when it stems from fear, is an opportunity to examine whether you are acting in alignment with your own life or simply performing to satisfy others' expectations. The liberation that comes from recognizing the source of guilt is transformative. Once you understand that guilt is often a conditioned response, you can respond with clarity and calmness rather than with self-reproach. You begin to see that saying no is not a betrayal of love or kindness. It is a declaration of self-respect. You learn to detach from the need for external validation and to honor your inner voice above all. This shift allows you to navigate relationships, opportunities, and demands with a sense of confidence and purpose that is rooted in truth rather than in fear. As you practice discerning the difference between real responsibility and guilt born of conditioning, you free yourself from unnecessary emotional weight. You begin to recognize that true generosity and authenticity arise not from obligation but from freedom. Guilt loses its grip, and in its place emerges a peaceful confidence. The knowledge that saying no when necessary is not only acceptable, it is sacred. You start living your life in alignment with your values, your purpose, and your highest calling, and this alignment becomes the foundation for lasting peace and fulfillment. Boundaries are often misunderstood. Many believe they are walls meant to shut people out, to isolate, or to reject love, but this is far from the truth. Boundaries are not barriers, they are gates. They are sacred markers that distinguish what belongs to you from what does not. They are the line between your energy and the world's demands, between your soul's peace and the pressures of obligation. When you set a boundary, you are not saying that others are unworthy or unwelcome. You are saying that your time, your focus, and your heart are valuable. You are honoring your own divinely given limits and refusing to let external forces deplete your spirit. Many people fear boundaries because they associate them with conflict or rejection. They worry that saying no will make them appear unkind, distant, or uncaring. But the truth is that people who truly respect you will respect your boundaries. Love that demands your unlimited availability is not love. It is expectation disguised as affection. By drawing clear lines, you are teaching others how to treat you and, more importantly, how to treat themselves in relation to you. Boundaries cultivate respect, understanding, and clarity in relationships, and they allow interactions to happen from a place of choice rather than obligation. A boundary is also a spiritual act. It is a declaration that your life is not a playground for every request, demand, or expectation that comes your way. It reflects maturity and self-awareness. Acknowledging that your energy is finite and sacred. When you uphold a boundary, you are not closing yourself off from the world. You are opening yourself to what is truly aligned with your purpose. You are creating space for relationships, projects, and opportunities that uplift rather than drain you. Without boundaries, life becomes a series of compromises that chip away at your integrity, your peace, and your joy. You may say yes out of guilt, fear, or habit, only to feel exhaustion, resentment, and emptiness. But when you cultivate the discipline to honor your boundaries, you are walking in alignment with your highest self. Each boundary becomes an act of self-respect, a practice of discernment, and a commitment to living intentionally. It is a recognition that your inner peace is not negotiable, and that protecting it is a sacred responsibility. Boundaries are not limitations, they are liberation. They do not isolate, they clarify. They do not reject, They define what is worthy of your time and energy. The stronger your boundaries, the stronger your presence, purpose, and peace. They are the gates through which your life flows with intentionality, power, and divine alignment. The ability to say no without guilt is a profound reflection of a healed relationship with yourself. Most people have not learned this because they have spent a lifetime measuring their worth against the expectations, opinions, and approval of others. They have been trained to believe that compliance is love, that agreement is acceptance, and that sacrifice is proof of value. This mindset creates an inner conflict that erodes self-respect and clouds judgment. A person who cannot say no without guilt is, in essence, still seeking validation from the outside world, still tethered to approval that is conditional and fleeting. But when a person cultivates a deep connection with their inner truth, they begin to see that saying no is not an act of defiance. It is an expression of integrity, self-awareness, and self-respect. Healing your relationship with yourself begins with recognizing that your energy, your time, and your priorities are sacred. When you are grounded in this truth, guilt loses its grip because it no longer has leverage over your sense of worth. You no longer feel compelled to say yes out of fear of disappointing someone, because you understand that your value is inherent and not dependent on the responses of others. Saying no becomes a form of self-honoring rather than self-denial, and every boundary you set is a reflection of your alignment with your authentic life. A healed relationship with yourself also allows you to navigate interactions with clarity and compassion. You can say no without aggression, without defensiveness, and without the heavy weight of apology. Instead, your refusal flows naturally from a place of certainty because you are rooted in your own needs and convictions. This inner wholeness allows you to be fully present when you say yes as well, ensuring that your consent is genuine, enthusiastic, and aligned with your purpose rather than coerced by fear. Moreover, when your relationship with yourself is healed, you recognize that guilt is often a social construct, a projection designed to manipulate compliance. You learn to discern between genuine responsibility and the pressure imposed by others. This discernment frees you from unnecessary emotional burden and cultivates a life in which your actions are driven by authenticity, not obligation. Every no spoken from this space strengthens your confidence, sharpens your boundaries, and deepens your connection to your true purpose. Ultimately, the ability to say no without guilt signals that you are whole, self-aware, and spiritually mature. It is the mark of someone who honors their own path, respects their own energy, and navigates life with a clarity and strength that cannot be shaken by external expectation. It is a sign that your relationship with yourself is sacred, healed, and unshakable. Every yes that comes from fear weakens your purpose, and every no that comes from truth strengthens it. Many people live their lives reacting to external pressures rather than responding to internal guidance. They say yes to invitations, responsibilities, and requests, not because they genuinely align with their values or purpose, but because they are afraid of disappointing someone, being judged, or missing out on approval. These fear-based yeses are silent thieves of energy. They dilute focus, scatter attention, and create a life that is reactive rather than intentional. The more often we prioritize the expectations of others over our inner truth, the more disconnected we become from the life we were meant to live. Fear-based agreement is exhausting because it is built on a lie, the lie that our worth depends on compliance. Each time we say yes out of fear, we trade a piece of our freedom and compromise a fragment of our purpose. We fill our schedules with obligations that do not serve us. We offer our energy to causes that do not align, and we sacrifice the clarity of our path for temporary comfort. Over time, this pattern erodes confidence, creates resentment, and leaves the soul yearning for authenticity. The life we end up living is full of shoulds and musts, leaving little room for the must-haves of our purpose, our passion, and our peace. Conversely, every no that comes from truth builds strength, clarity, and alignment. When you can refuse something without guilt, you are declaring that your time, energy, and attention are sacred. You are acknowledging that not every opportunity, request, or expectation deserves your presence. Saying no from truth is not rejection, it is redirection. It is a conscious choice to prioritize what truly matters over what merely demands attention. With each truthful no, you create space for the yeses that actually align with your calling, relationships that nurture, opportunities that elevate, and actions that resonate with your deepest values. Living in alignment requires courage, discernment, and spiritual clarity. It requires the ability to face the discomfort of saying no to people or situations that seek to pull you off your path. Yet the reward is profound. Focus becomes sharper, energy becomes lighter, and purpose becomes undeniable. Your life begins to unfold in harmony with your true self rather than in accordance with the demands of others. Fear-based yeses fade away, replaced by empowered, truth-based decisions that strengthen your trajectory and amplify your impact. In essence, fear weakens, truth empowers. Every yes driven by fear diminishes your light, while every no rooted in truth illuminates your path. It is through these conscious choices that you honor your life, your purpose, and the sacred potential within you. Detachment is one of the most misunderstood principles in personal and spiritual growth. Many people think detachment means being cold, indifferent, or emotionally distant. But in truth, detachment is a form of clarity, a recognition of what deserves your energy and what does not. When you cultivate detachment, you are no longer controlled by the need to please, the fear of disapproval, or the pull of manipulation. You are able to observe situations, requests, and relationships with a calm, centered awareness, recognizing that your peace is not negotiable and your energy is precious. Detachment is not the absence of love or care, it is the presence of discernment. It allows you to love fully while protecting yourself from depletion, chaos, or compromise. Many people confuse attachment with responsibility, thinking that every demand or expectation is theirs to fulfill. They take on burdens that are not theirs, absorbing emotions, obligations, and pressures that belong to others. This creates guilt, exhaustion, and a persistent sense of being overwhelmed. Detachment is the spiritual antidote to this pattern. When you practice detachment, you recognize that you are not responsible for managing everyone else's feelings, reactions, or judgments. You understand that you can engage with the world compassionately without losing yourself in the process. You can say no without guilt because you are not entangled in the illusion that pleasing everyone is your duty. Detachment also strengthens confidence. When you operate from detachment, your decisions are guided by purpose, not pressure. You are no longer swayed by the fear of conflict, rejection, or disapproval. You no longer compromise your values or energy to meet the expectations of others. Instead, you act with clarity, conviction, and calm authority. Saying no becomes not an act of denial, but an act of alignment. It communicates that your life has order, your priorities have weight, and your peace has boundaries. Furthermore, detachment is a sign of spiritual maturity. It reflects a deep understanding that life flows according to a greater intelligence, and that not every opportunity, relationship, or obligation requires your consent or attention. You begin to recognize the difference between what is necessary and what is distracting, between what is aligned and what is merely demanding. Through this lens, every no becomes sacred, a deliberate choice to preserve your energy and protect your inner life. Ultimately, detachment empowers you to live fully without being consumed. It allows you to engage with the world without surrendering your peace, to say yes when aligned and no when necessary. Detachment is not distance from life. It is mastery over how life touches you, a sacred discipline that ensures your energy is reserved for what truly matters. When you stop performing for approval, you begin living from alignment. This is a principle that changes everything, because so much of human life is spent in the pursuit of validation rather than truth. From an early age, many of us learn that being liked, accepted, or praised is the ultimate measure of our worth. We adjust our words, actions, and even our desires to fit into the expectations of others. Over time, this creates a life that is reactive and performative, where choices are dictated by fear of judgment rather than the inner compass of purpose. Living for approval may feel safe at first, but it quietly erodes the authenticity, clarity, and power of your spirit. When you choose alignment over approval, everything shifts. Alignment means living in accordance with your values, priorities, and divine purpose rather than bending to the fluctuating demands of other people's opinions. It is not rebellion or defiance, it is truth in motion. Saying no without guilt is one of the clearest expressions of this alignment. You no longer fear displeasing someone because your worth is not defined by their response. Instead, you operate from a place of inner certainty, knowing that every decision, every boundary, every refusal is an act of integrity and self-respect. Living from alignment also liberates your energy. When you are no longer performing to gain approval, you stop scattering your attention on things that do not serve you. You reclaim the hours, focus, and passion that were once spent trying to earn acceptance, and you redirect them toward pursuits that truly matter. Your relationships, work, and life decisions become purposeful and intentional. People no longer drain you. Circumstances no longer dictate your inner state. Instead, you act with clarity, choosing what deserves your time and what does not. Moreover, alignment cultivates confidence and spiritual authority. There is a quiet power in knowing that your actions reflect your values, not the expectations of others. You become magnetic to situations and people that resonate with your truth, and you naturally repel those that do not. Each no spoken without guilt is an affirmation that your life is not negotiable, that your purpose is sacred, and that your peace is a priority. Ultimately, to live from alignment is to live authentically. It is to let go of the need for validation, to embrace the courage to honor your inner voice, and to navigate life with clarity, conviction, and integrity. When you stop performing for approval, you step into a life that is not only freer, but profoundly more powerful, purposeful, and fulfilling. Alignment becomes the foundation upon which every decision, boundary, and no is built, and it transforms fear into freedom, pressure into peace, and obligation into sacred choice. True love respects boundaries. Manipulation resents them. This is a distinction that is often overlooked because most people confuse attachment, expectation, or dependency with love. Love, in its highest and purest form, does not seek to control, guilt, or coerce. It does not demand that another person sacrifice their peace, compromise their purpose, or surrender their energy to satisfy someone else's desires. True love is patient, compassionate, and aware of the sacred space that each individual occupies. It recognizes that boundaries are not obstacles but markers of respect, clarity, and self-care. When someone respects your limits, honors your decisions, and values your well-being, that is love in action. Manipulation, on the other hand, resents boundaries because it thrives on control, fear, and compliance. It sees a boundary not as a declaration of self-respect, but as a challenge to its influence. Manipulation pressures, guilts, and provokes, attempting to erode the strength it fears in another person. When a boundary is met with resentment, anger, or coercion, it reveals the true nature of the relationship. It is not built on mutual respect, but on dependency or expectation. Learning to discern this difference is essential because it determines whether saying no will be met with understanding or with resistance. True love rejoices in honesty and integrity, while manipulation is threatened by clarity and detachment. Honoring boundaries is also a spiritual practice. It is a recognition that your energy, focus, and time are sacred. It is a conscious choice to engage in relationships and responsibilities that nurture rather than deplete. When love respects boundaries, it allows for growth, freedom, and authenticity. It encourages both parties to operate from truth rather than fear, creating a dynamic where connection is chosen rather than demanded. In this space, communication flows, trust deepens, and relationships thrive without compromise of self. The moment you realize that manipulation will always resist your boundaries, you no longer take it personally. You understand that resistance is not a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of someone else's need for control. This realization frees you to stand firm, to say no without guilt, and to prioritize your well-being while remaining compassionate. In essence, the way people respond to your boundaries reveals the true nature of their intentions. True love uplifts and respects. Manipulation undermines and resents. Recognizing this distinction empowers you to navigate your relationships with clarity, courage, and sacred discernment, ensuring that your life is aligned with respect, integrity, and peace. Spiritual maturity is revealed in the ability to choose peace over people-pleasing. Many spend their lives bending, contorting, and sacrificing their inner well-being to meet the expectations of others, believing that approval and acceptance are the currency of love and success. They say yes when every fiber of their being wants to say no, enduring discomfort, resentment, and exhaustion in the process. This tendency is not a reflection of weakness, but of undeveloped discernment, a lack of spiritual clarity that keeps the soul tethered to fear, guilt, and the opinions of the external world. Spiritual maturity, however, emerges when you recognize that your inner peace is more valuable than the fleeting validation of others. It is the realization that no relationship, obligation, or approval is worth compromising the sanctity of your mind, heart, and energy. Choosing peace over people-pleasing requires a radical act of awareness. It demands that you observe the motivations behind your decisions, asking whether your actions are driven by fear of judgment or by alignment with truth. When you operate from fear, your yes becomes a form of self-betrayal. It diminishes your strength and clouds your purpose. But when you operate from discernment, every decision, every boundary, and every refusal becomes a reflection of spiritual integrity. Saying no without guilt is one of the clearest demonstrations of this maturity because it signals that you are no longer controlled by external pressures, but guided by the quiet wisdom of your inner voice. This spiritual strength does not mean indifference or detachment from others. On the contrary, it allows you to engage more fully, authentically, and compassionately. When you are no longer performing for approval, your interactions are rooted in truth, presence, and intention. You offer yourself fully when you say yes and protect yourself wisely when you say no. Each decision becomes a conscious choice rather than a reactive compliance, and this awareness transforms relationships, work, and life experiences. The journey to spiritual maturity also teaches resilience in the face of resistance. Not everyone will understand your boundaries or respect your peace. Some will react with frustration, disappointment, or guilt tripping, testing the strength of your resolve. Yet, the spiritually mature person recognizes that these reactions are not a reflection of their worth, but a reflection of the other person's expectations and conditioning. Standing firm, saying no when necessary, and prioritizing peace over people-pleasing is an act of self-respect and divine alignment. Ultimately, spiritual maturity is the conscious choice to honor your inner life, protect your energy, and cultivate harmony within yourself. It is the awareness that peace is never negotiable, and that saying no when needed is not rejection. It is a sacred expression of wisdom, integrity, and alignment with the highest version of yourself. Saying no is not a loss. It is an act of sacred self-respect. So often people view no as a denial, a rejection, or a failure, as if refusing a request diminishes their worth or separates them from love, opportunity, or connection. But this perspective is rooted in misunderstanding and fear. Every time you say no from a place of truth and discernment, you are not closing a door. You are honoring the life that is meant for you. You are acknowledging that your time, energy, and focus are sacred resources, not commodities to be given away indiscriminately. To say no without guilt is to embrace the inherent dignity of your own existence and to recognize that your life has boundaries that are deserving of respect. Many people fear that saying no will create conflict, disappointment, or rejection. They worry that others will misunderstand, take offense, or withdraw love and acceptance. Yet those fears often obscure a deeper truth. The loss they fear is rarely real, and the cost of saying yes at the expense of themselves is far greater. Every yes that does not align with your purpose chips away at your energy, your clarity, and your peace. Conversely, every no spoken from integrity strengthens the framework of your life, creating space for relationships, opportunities, and experiences that truly belong to you. Saying no is an act of discernment, a spiritual practice that communicates to the world, and more importantly to yourself, that your life is not negotiable. The sacredness of a well-placed no also lies in its ability to cultivate authenticity. When you honor your limits and refuse what is not aligned, you set a standard for how you expect to be treated. You teach others that your presence is valuable, your energy is finite, and your choices are deliberate. This clarity reduces manipulation, discourages exploitation, and fosters respect in every interaction. Saying no becomes an act of empowerment, a way to live intentionally rather than reactively. Moreover, refusing what is misaligned is not only self-respect, but also a gift to others. By declining what you cannot serve fully, you allow others the opportunity to find alignment themselves. You prevent resentment, fatigue, and miscommunication from taking root in your relationships. Each no spoken wisely becomes a declaration of purpose, a boundary that protects your inner life and an invitation for life to meet you where you are ready. Saying no is not a loss. It is the highest expression of self-respect, clarity, and sacred alignment, and it signals that your life is yours to steward with wisdom and integrity. The power to say no without guilt is not merely a skill, it is a declaration of who you are and who you are becoming. It is a statement that your peace, your purpose, and your energy are sacred, and that nothing outside of alignment can diminish their value. Every boundary you set, every refusal you speak from truth, is an act of spiritual authority, a step toward freedom, and a claim to the life you were meant to live. When you embrace this practice, fear loses its power, guilt dissolves, and clarity emerges. You begin to live intentionally, love authentically, and act from a place of divine wisdom rather than external expectation. Remember this. Saying no is not rejection. It is the ultimate affirmation of self-respect, the sacred protection of your soul, and the doorway to a life of purpose, peace, and power. Stand firm, honor yourself, and let your no be the compass that guides you toward everything you were born to embrace.